Isometric RPGs have been a pillar of the industry for decades. With the recent release of Lost Ark, which we'll be covering here soon, and the success of games like Diablo and Torchlight, fans of isometric games have had a load of great titles to sink their teeth into. Today we'll be going through another recent addition called the Ascent. The Ascent is a cyberpunk-style action role-playing game from a Swedish-based indie studio called Neo Giant. And at first glance it definitely has a lot of interesting things going for it. The game supports co-op of up to 4 players, the graphics, models and visual effects all complement one another and are nice and cyberpunky, really helping to draw you into the world they've created. Mechanically they've done a really good job too. The gun mechanics are punchy and responsive with a nice variety of weapons. Aiming is smooth and there are active skills to mix up your playstyle. The game also has a decent amount of customization that you can do from your overall appearance to your skills and weapons. All of this mixes together to make a really cool isometric game, and one that has the potential for a lot of people to enjoy, especially fans of Cyberpunk. However, where it all starts to fall down for us is in the wider philosophy of the game's design. The first few hours we were playing had that new game feel, that honeymoon period where you can kind of overlook some of the flaws because the novelty carries you through. But after this wore off, the cracks began to show for us. While the game does feel great mechanically, the cracks that started to show are in the nature of the grind, the lack of variety and the need to run around for a long time moving from point A to point B. But I will say that bosses do break this up. The bosses are mechanically different and in many cases enjoyably challenging. And while all of this might be okay for some, we thought it was a point of concern when compared to the overall quality of the rest of the game. For those looking for a mechanically sound and enjoyable experience, and don't mind the grind or lack of variety in your missions or the enemies, this might be a game that you really might enjoy. As always, if you like this kind of content, feel free to leave a like, or if you want to stick with us for a while and join the community, you can click the sub button below. It helps us out and lets us know what you guys like to see.
We've had our fair share of Cyberpunk titles in 2021, but the Ascent might just be one you missed. It certainly was for us. Developed by a small team of only 12 people, what we found was an aesthetically beautiful visual experience, only made better by their choice of cinematic camera angles dispersed between bouts of quite intense action. This is all set in a world where the structure of society takes a form unlike ever seen before, as different extraterrestrial races live amongst one another, bringing with them technology that has increasingly skewed the balance of power. The world design and art style, in our opinion, is the game's strongest aspect. The environment is fully fleshed out, so much more detail than you end up taking in. This helps immerse you despite the storyline that left us spamming the skip button more often than maybe we should have as reviewers. In a general sense, we felt that given the interesting lore, the story could have hit the characters on a more personal level, but chose to go with you fitting into the established narrative, doing side quests that belong more to a monthly subscription MMO. The detail in the tilesets are taken a step further by seamlessly utilising different camera angles to accentuate landscapes and details. These are things you wouldn't traditionally see in an isometric format. This had the biggest wow factor for us and truly made us appreciate what we were seeing. You start with quite basic character customization options, not a big deal considering the angle you're looking down on yourself at, and in addition to armour fully changing your look anyway. First of all, you mustn't think of the gameplay as your Path of Exile or Diablo click-to-move format, because it serves more like your old-school twin-stick shooter brought into the modern age. The movement itself is perfectly responsive and non-restrictive. You'll move at the same speed regardless of the direction you're facing, lending to the more arcadey feel over the more realistic inhibited movement style based on the direction you're facing. You'll hit to chunk enemies cleanly at a fast pace, and the mechanics don't jump into too much more depth than this point-and-click combat style. In addition to mouse and keyboard, you can play using both sticks on a controller. And if this is your preference, there's even a gun with aim assist that might be more to your liking. Gunplay is particularly satisfying. You'll steamroll most of the cronies you come across, occasionally dealing with some harder, more elite units, until you reach the hard-hitting bullet sponges that are the boss types. Most enemies felt pretty similar to each other in design, with us rarely having to change our approach to the gunfight. Death mostly comes at unsuspecting times, generally to the heavy hitters, but it depends on how you improve your stats through leveling up. Rather creatively, your stats don't just follow the gain health or gain damage format, but rather affect things like weapon swap speed and bullet spread too. We opted for Bias to go tanky and me glass cannon, which mostly led to me dying a lot more, whilst it felt like we dealt very similar damage anyway. Players can dodge roll to avoid large enemy attacks, and for those who like efficiency, this will also be your fastest way to get around, ensuring that you stand out from the crowd in a world that feels alive and lived in, Everywhere you go, you'll see neutral civilians that you will guiltily catch occasionally in Crossfire. There is a cover mechanic that reminded me of Gears of War, although I don't use it all too often, due to some enemies being able to shoot past it, and me not knowing who half the time meant I just didn't rely on it very much. However, that may just be my mistake. In addition to the gunplay, you get 2 abilities that you can use from time to time to noticeably change the tide of battle, like this One Punch Man AoE ability, capable of relieving you of pressure from immediate danger. When it comes to equipment, there are a decent amount of weapons that you come across, most of which have unique offerings to a gunfight. However, most of the time, we found that we didn't really want to replace our current favourite, save for just trying the new one out for a bit before switching back. These options come as sidearms, machine guns, shotguns, precision marksmen, and what they call excessive weapons. These are your miniguns or explosive types that are, well, excessive. To top it all off, you'll be able to upgrade any weapon as you progress, keeping it in line with the difficulty of enemies you come across. And then there's armour that can be looted too, altering the look of your character and providing a number of stat modifiers for you to and R over, often having to make compromises on certain stats to gain your more preferable choices. Finally, you have tacticals that come in the form of grenades, turrets, and healing fields. The game for us wasn't without its bugs or annoyances. We found the green icon that tells you where to go at times sent me and Bias in opposite directions, despite going to the same place, and even to dead ends a few times. This added to what already felt like marathon levels of running between locations throughout. Strangely, at times when we wiped during a fight, we'd respawn past that area, not having to deal with it again. And my aim was also locked into a single direction, requiring a restart to get going again. Ultimately, there is so much going on for this game. The Ascent brings with it many interesting and unique ideas, but as an overall experience, just often left us a bit tired of the monotony of enemy types and gunplay options available.
You can probably tell by now whether or not this is a game for you. There are some great design choices, interesting mechanics, and for the lovers of Cyberpunk, the overall look and feel is something that a lot of people will love. The make or break with this one will really depend on how you as a player are willing to accept the repetitive gameplay cycle and thin storyline, in favour for a mechanically enjoyable system. For us personally, the grind and repetitive nature of the missions, and the lack of variety in the enemies was a bit too much of a push, and because of these things it's not one that we personally can recommend. Which is a shame because there are really some cool areas of the game, and it would have been nice for the gunplay aesthetics and customization all to be backed up with a fully fleshed out story and range of different things to test your skill on. But despite our personal gripes with the game, if you love isometric titles, don't mind the grind, and you're looking for something new to try, this may well be one for you to check out. Let us know in the comments what you think of the game, and we'll see you in the next one.